Today I'm going over 35 differences between America and Italy as an American living in Italy for the last 4 years. Let's get started. We've been all over Italy in the last 4 years, from Milan all the way down to Sicily. We live in northern Italy, but I'm very aware that there's a difference between northern and southern Italy. So these are the differences that I've learned living here. Don't take any of these as blanket statements, though some of them may sound like it, just speaking from experience. And we love America and Italy, so we embrace the differences. I just think it's fun to point them out. If we haven't met yet, my name is Kalen. I'm the founder of Freedom Sprout, where we talk about raising intentional children and living intentional lives. If that interests you, please hit the subscribe button below. Now here are the 35 differences between America and Italy. These are all totally random, so I've broke it up into 3 sections to make it easier to follow. General living, demeanor, and food. Let's start with general living. Americans tend to live to work, whereas Italians work to live. Though in the north, a lot of Italians work a lot, we've been told that Americans work too much by most Italians. Number 2, you don't smile at people in public, and they don't smile at you. Unless you have kids, they'll smile at the kids, but not so much at you. Nobody's mean mugging you, it's just in their culture that you don't smile to strangers like we do in the States in a lot of places. Number 3, air conditioning isn't overly common. We've got used to it living here. We have 2 small air conditioning units in our house, one for downstairs and one for upstairs, but we've used them less and less over our time here. Number 4, when it's 65 degrees outside, Fahrenheit, Italians are typically in a full-blown coat, scarf, and gloves. Italians don't like the cold. Number 5, everything is smaller in Italy. The refrigerators, the washers, the dryers, everything. A lot of people don't even have dryers. It's not uncommon to hang your clothes to dry here in Italy. Even the cars are smaller here. We have a Honda Odyssey, and there's been more than one occasion where we've had to pull in our side view mirrors to fit through a town. Number 6, they don't have large families in Italy, typically. The saying is 1 is not enough and 2 is too many. Most Italians have 1 kid. It's not uncommon to have 2 kids. We have 5 kids. We get stares. People count us off whenever we walk by. It's normal. Number 7, families often live together here for multiple generations, whereas that's not very common in the States. Number 8, Italians don't have anywhere close to as much stuff as Americans have. They're minimalist by default. Even our neighbors here, who are basically Italian rednecks, Italians refer to them as mountain people, they don't have as much stuff as the typical redneck from back where I'm from in the South in the States. They have what we would call a redneck garden with tarps and trash can lids playing a lot of different roles, but they still only have the things that they actually need. Number 9, the houses in Italy are small or huge. Whenever we were looking for a home, our only options were a 1,300 square foot little Italian villa, or maybe a 1,300 square foot, 1,500 square foot apartment, or a 4,000 or 5,000 square foot home that was probably meant for multiple families with like 2 or 3 living rooms and 7 bedrooms and sometimes 2 kitchens. So the houses in Italy are either small or they're huge. Number 10, and I know this is super random, but all these points are, public radio is not edited in Italy. So it's not uncommon to hear some words that you definitely wouldn't hear in the States when you're at McDonald's with your family or walking through the mall. And 99% of the time, the songs are in English. So a lot of Italians might not even know what they're saying, but our kids do. So that's awkward.
I'm 11, so shut the f.
Number 11, Italians and Europeans in general tend to prefer military time, is what we would call it. They call it 24-hour time, but it's the standard here in Italy. And a lot of Americans probably wouldn't even be able to figure out what time it was. Number 12, roundabouts. So many roundabouts, and I love it. Number 13, the outlets here and all the power in the homes is 220. In America, it's 110. Long story short, light bulbs don't stand a chance here. Number 14, metric system. I understand that that's most countries in the world outside of the United States and a few other countries, but they use the metric system here. I'm so used to judging speed and distance by kilometers now. It seems like forever when we go back to the States and we're using miles again.
I think a milliliter is small. Therefore, this is 1,000 milliliters.
The next section is demeanor, so demeanor differences. Number 15, Italians speak loudly. Italians are loud. When we first moved in, I couldn't tell the difference between a general conversation and a domestic dispute when our neighbors were talking to each other, but now we've gotten used to it.
Forget about it! I'm busting beans!
Number 16, Italians are blunt. They're not afraid to say what they're thinking. And they have no problem with that, and I've actually learned to appreciate that. So for example, if you're overweight, if you've gained 10 pounds since the last time you saw someone, don't be surprised if they point it out. Number 17, Italians are not as obsessed with making money as Americans are. In America, we have the general entrepreneur mindset and just trying to get more money and working side jobs. Italians don't care about money that much. They just, again, work to live. Number 18, along the same lines as the last point, Italians aren't afraid to discuss their finances, and they're not afraid to ask you about yours. In America, it's almost a sin to talk about your personal finances with anybody. Number 19, Italians can be very trusting, more so than you would see in the States, and this may go back to the last point of the making money and the keeping money, but we actually ordered 30 euros worth of pizza one time, and we didn't realize until we went to check out that they didn't accept cards and we didn't have any cash, and the guy was like, just come back tomorrow and give me the money. Here's the pizza. You're my guest. So that doesn't happen in the States a lot unless you're in a small town, and this guy did not know us, but we ended up becoming regular customers of his, and a lot of that was because of his trust, and we appreciated that. Number 20, Italians are never in a hurry to get anywhere until they get behind the wheel. So an Italian's general demeanor is very different from their demeanor whenever they're driving on the road. Number 21, Italians hate to wait. An Italian line is like an oxymoron. You do not see those here. A line or a queue, it's a gaggle. It's an Italian gaggle. And don't be surprised if someone tries to cut in front of you in line, because Italians can be very impatient, and most of the Italians that I know will admit to that. Number 22, Italian men are romantic just in general. They have an ability to charm that Americans just don't have. Number 23, and I think this is a really cool one, Italians don't tend to point out errors like Americans do, or mistakes. And again, this is mostly Europe in general, but if you trip on a curb or if you fall off a bicycle or something like that, they may be concerned for your safety, but nobody's gonna laugh, nobody's gonna make fun of you. And whenever people do trip and little things like that, I've never seen them look around to see if anyone saw what they just did. Italians just don't do that. Number 24, the clothing style here is very different. It's very fitted. And I haven't been back to the States much in the last 4 years, so I'm sure it may have changed a little bit with the general clothing style, but Italians wear their clothes very fitted. Everyone seems to care about their appearance. You don't see people going out in public in the clothes that they woke up in. They just generally care about their appearance more than Americans do, and I think we could learn a lot from that. Number 25, going back to the driving, lane 3. Lane 3 is a thing here. That's whenever you're driving on the road, on a 2-lane road, and you're getting passed while an oncoming car is coming, and you both scoot over enough to where all 3 of you can pass at the same time on a road that's barely wide enough for 2 cars. And the final section, and probably the most important section, food. Number 26, the food isn't as processed in Italy as it is in the States. They thrive on fresh food, and you can definitely taste the difference, and they have all kinds of fresh food available daily. So for a lot of Americans, especially Southerners, the food may not seem as seasoned, aka as salty, as it is in the States, but it's all going to be fresher than it is in the States. Number 27, the pizza is much more basic. If you order 2 or 3 toppings on your pizza, expect 3 or 4 of each of those toppings. And real quick, to break a myth, pineapple on pizza is a thing here, but it is frowned upon by a lot of Italians, but not all Italians. It's fairly common to see pineapple on pizza here if you go to enough places. Number 28, dinner is an all-night affair. Every night. In my experience in dining with Italians and going to restaurants and just generally living here, Italians will have a small breakfast, a light lunch, and a dinner that could feed a horse. Which brings me to number 29, Italians eat way later than Americans generally eat. The restaurants typically don't even open until 6, a lot of them don't open until 7 p.m. And then a lot of Italians don't have dinner until 8 or 9 p.m. and then it lasts until midnight. Number 30, free tap water really isn't a thing here. Some restaurants will provide it, and then a lot of restaurants will look at you funny if you ask for free water. They'll serve you the bottles of water, and the default seems to be sparkling water instead of still water, but you're not going to see free water in very many restaurants. Also, ice isn't really a thing here, at least not in your drinks. Number 31, the coffee. The coffee here is so much stronger than general American coffee. That being said, a cup of American coffee still has more caffeine in it because the cup itself is so much larger than the small cups the Italians use. But coffee is super strong. Basically, espresso is what you're getting most of the time. You can order an Americana, but that's just espresso with water in it. But of course, coffee is a big deal. They have the espresso, they have the cappuccinos, they have the macchiatos, they have all kinds of different coffee, and coffee bars are all over the place. That being said, a bar here is typically a coffee coffee bar, not an alcohol bar. So that's another difference. Number 32, the food options aren't as diverse in Italy as they are in America. 90% of the restaurants here, I'm estimating, are just Italian restaurants, but they just call them restaurants. But then about 10% of the restaurants includes everything else, like American, Mexican, but you'll very rarely find Mexican food here. And when you do find Mexican, it's very different. More likely gonna be like Spanish food instead of Mexican food. If you go to Rome, go to Pico's in Rome, shout out to them. Best Mexican we've had in Rome, and we actually go there like 3 or 4 times every time we're in Rome. But in America, it's a melting pot of different restaurants, and you have all kinds of options. Here, you do have a few fast food options in Italy, not near as many as you do in the States. Number 33, you can drink at 18 years old in Italy, which leads me to my next point. Number 34, Italians don't get hammered drunk like Americans do all the time. I'm in the military, so I'm sure I see it more than civilians, but if you go to an American bar at 2 o'clock in the morning, you're gonna see a ridiculous mess of drunk. Whereas an Italian bar at midnight or 2 o'clock in the morning, everyone's still standing around having conversations. They're capable of standing, that kind of stuff. That being said, Italians have found a way to drink all day long, having wine with lunch and then having a spritzer before their dinner and then having wine with their dinner and then maybe limoncello after and then maybe grappa, which is terrible, but they do tend to drink all day long, and maybe that's why they don't get hammered drunk, because Americans drink to get drunk a lot of times. You'll rarely see that in Italy, unless you go to some of the actual clubs, but still much rarer than in the States. Number 35, and the final point, almost everyone in Italy can cook. Not the case in America. Whether it's a man or a woman, or even a young man or a woman, they're gonna be able to cook, and they're taught to cook when they're growing up. It's just part of their culture. So those aren't all the differences, but those are the main ones that I've noticed. If you've been to Italy, comment below and tell me the differences that you've seen between America and Italy. Before you go, please subscribe to get more videos on money, minimalism, and our travel journey around the world. Check out my new book, Intentional Children. I'll put a link to that below. That's all for today. I'll see you next week.